The top business stories live from the Sky newsroom. The competition watchdog deals a blow to Vodafone and Three's £15 billion merger plans. I'll get reaction from Vodafone's European boss. Plans for the UK's first coal mine in 30 years are thrown out by a High Court judge. Plus, for the battle for control of the Daily Telegraph, Nadeem Zahawi approaches a former Conservative treasurer about funding his bid for the paper. Good morning. This is Business Live with me, Paul Kelso. We start this morning with a warning from the competition regulator that tens of millions of mobile phone users could end up paying more if a £15 billion merger between Vodafone and Three goes ahead. The deal would create the UK's biggest mobile network, bringing 27 million customers together under a single provider. But the Competition and Markets Authority said today that claims that the merger would provide a faster 5G network were overstated, and customers could end up paying more for services that they don't value.
And we're concerned that the merger will push up customer bills and lead to increases in prices across the market because of the reduction in competition. It doesn't stop there, however, because both companies have argued quite strongly that they would make significant investments in their new network with new 5G technologies, and that those will lead to quite significant improvements in mobile services across the UK. And we agree to some extent. However, we're not convinced that they would necessarily follow through fully on the investments that they say they will make.
So that's the case against, but this is how Vodafone's share price is looking this morning, up nearly 1%. And that suggests the markets think there's a way of this deal getting done. Let's talk to somebody who's going to be involved in trying to make that happen, presumably. Ahmed Assam, Vodafone's Chief Executive of European Markets. Good morning. CMA is pretty clear this morning. Customers are going to have to pay more. This is a bad deal for British consumers. Why are they wrong?
So thank you, Paul, and good morning to you as well. And thank you for giving me the chance to speak to you this morning. It's really important to look at what comes at the heart of this merger. And at heart, it's an 11 billion of investment to create the biggest, widest mobile network in the UK. The UK today trails behind the majority of the European market in terms of 5G, and we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create such an amazing solution for our consumers and businesses in the UK. We're very pleased to see today that we're getting to a next stage. As you said, the announcement from the CMA is provisional findings, meaning we still need to work through the coming few months to work with the CMA to come to a conclusion and address their concerns. We believe that this deal, day one, will bring a lot of benefits to our customers because it's a merger that will, customers day one will be able to pay the same price for what is a much better quality network. And over the course of the plan, we will be building the best and fastest and biggest network in the UK.
The CMA clearly think differently, notwithstanding they have doubts about your promise there on the network, but they say prices will go up for consumers. I mean, your customers faced a nearly 8% price increase already this year. Can you guarantee consumers won't pay more?
So it's a really good question. Just to address this, we completely disagree with the CMA conclusion when it comes to pricing. And that's because for many of our customers today, when they go out on the street, there are more than four operators operating in the market. There are a number of brands that are selling mobile in the market, and that is the level of competition we see in the UK. On the back of this transaction, what we will have is a scaled player in the market, a scaled player that's not only able to compete on price, but will be competing on quality. There is a massive population out there that's suffering from digital divide. There are areas that are in towns and villages where they are struggling with coverage. And we think and we believe that our investment will address this concern. Another point to add is what we heard earlier from Stuart, which is they see the uplift in quality, and we are willing to commit on the level of investment going forward. So we're willing to take a legal binding commitment on the level of investment that will provide benefits and positive customer outcomes, not only in the main cities, but most importantly in the rural side, in villages, to cover every hospital, every school in the UK. That is the commitment we have in terms of building our network. The other commitment we made to the CMA is a fairer distribution of the radio waves through an agreement with one of our competitors to transfer some of the spectrum, which will not only benefit our customers, but will benefit more than 50 million customers in the UK.
If I hear you right, I think you're saying the only way the UK can have a up-to-date and fit-for-purpose mobile network is allowing you to become a giant player, and customers might just have to wear a reduction in competition when it comes to how much they pay. Is that really a good deal for consumers? Why can't we have both competition on retail price and a good network?
So what I'm saying is, I think today we have an opportunity of 11 billion of investment out of our own money, not taxpayers' money, to create what is the best network. This will not only encourage our competitors to compete with us from a pricing perspective, but you can expect them to react by investing more in their networks. So eventually customers, and that's our view, customers in the UK will be able to get what is a much better quality network, much bigger out of a much bigger investment, and also the price competition. Our view is that it's not going to be reduced. In fact, it's going to be enhanced on the back of this merger. Our proposed merger, we see it as pro-competition, pro-consumer, and will accelerate investment in the 5G infrastructure that's highly needed for a better digitally connected UK for the future.
You've set out the offers you've made and the commitments you've already made to the CMA. Clearly not enough to get the green light at this stage. They've given you some remedies, as they call them, options you can take. One is to divest, to sell off company. They don't seem to think either of you getting any smaller is an option. The other is some guarantees around what you will build, Ofcom having oversight, and guarantees to the wholesalers like Lebara, like Sky, which owns this channel, as a declaration of interest. Are you willing to do those? Which is it likely to be? Because presumably you do want to get this across the line.
So we've already made a commitment, and we are willing to undertake a legal binding agreement to underpin our investment with timeline, plans, and execution. And that is something that has been at the heart of this merger day one. We are going to work with the CMA over the coming 3 months to make sure that we address all their concerns when it comes to all the other remedies. We are confident that we can reach a solution, but of course we will need to work this out through the coming few months. And as I said earlier, the provisional findings today sets out what we need to work on for a final conclusion by the CMA in December.
Do you think you'll get this done, yes or no?
I have very high confidence. I think when you ask this question, it comes at a moment in time when this is really a transformational merger. Not only transformational for us as a business, transformational for the UK in general. I think it comes at a point where the economic growth is at the heart of what the UK wants to drive, and we see a private investment of 11 billion going into the market is an amazing opportunity to pursue, in addition to the positive outcomes that our consumers will benefit from.
Ahmed Essam from Vodafone, thanks for making time for Sky News this morning.
Thank you very much, Paul.
It's been a busy week in the battle for the Daily Telegraph, and another edition has dropped this morning. Mike Kleinman has the story as ever. What's in the latest copy, Mark?
Yeah, that's right, Paul. This latest development relates to the bid for the Daily Telegraph being assembled by Nadeem Zahawi, the former Chancellor. What I can reveal this morning is that Mr Zahawi has approached Sir Mohammed Mansour, the former Conservative Party Treasurer, about backing his prospective bid for the Telegraph newspapers. Now, it's not entirely clear yet whether Sir Mohammed will participate in this offer. As I reported a few weeks back, Mr Zahawi has also approached other very wealthy individuals, including the Reuben family, who own a stake in Newcastle United Football Club. But people close to Mr Zahawi do say that he's confident of submitting a competitive bid for the titles. Just to recap on the events of this week, Paul. The Spectator magazine, the sister title of the Telegraph newspapers, was sold to Sir Paul Marshall for £100 million. Sir Paul is also continuously being linked to a bid for the newspapers. And the other two known or declared bidders are David Montgomery's National World, and one we heard about emerge this week, which was David F. Yoon, the owner of the New York Sun. And as we talked about yesterday, Paul, that has raised the tantalising prospect of a return to the Telegraph for Lord Conrad Black, the former proprietor, who, of course, was imprisoned in 2007 for 3 years and subsequently pardoned by President Trump in 2019. Now, the deadline for second round formal offers for the Telegraph is the 27th of September. There's still a couple of weeks to go until then, so more twists and turns in store. But today's development is that Nadeem Zahawi has been sounding out the former Tory Treasurer Sir Mohammed Mansour about backing his bid, and we can safely say that if the two of them were to join forces, the Telegraph would really have earned its nickname of the Tory Graph.
Yeah, a cast of characters, Mark, that might make it even worth buying a newspaper. Thanks very much. The decision to grant planning permission for what would have been the UK's first coal mine in 30 years has been quashed at the High Court. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, has been at the High Court this morning. Tom, this is clearly an impactful decision, not just for this coal mine. It feels like this might be the end of coal in the UK. But this interpretation of a Supreme Court ruling about how fossil fuel emissions are accounted for would seem to have implications. I mean, does this mean that oil and gas, and then also I'm thinking of the Rosebank development particularly, is this the end for oil and gas too?
Well, it certainly might look like that, given the strength of this judgment. It could go down as a landmark case, because it's the first test of a decision, as you alluded to there, by the Supreme Court earlier this summer around an oil and gas drilling project here in the UK. And the Supreme Court found that it's no longer acceptable just to consider the local environmental impact of a fossil fuel project. They have to also include the emissions when you burn that fossil fuel. And today's decision at the High Court around the West Cumbria coal mining project, the Whitehaven mine that was going to produce high quality, as backers said, coking coal for the steel industry, failed to include that in its planning permission, and it therefore ruled that that planning was unlawful, and they have quashed the planning permission. Does that also apply to other cases? Joining me now is Katie de Cauwer, the lawyer for Friends of the Earth, who brought this case to the High Court. A victory for you. You didn't just win on one ground, on all four grounds here. What implications does this have for future fossil fuel projects here in the UK?
I think it's a serious blow for the fossil fuel industry in the UK. I think the writing really is on the wall in terms of the absolute need to consider the full climate impacts. As you say, we succeeded in our challenge on all four of our grounds. Not only that the emissions from burning the coal needed to be considered, they weren't, so the decision was unlawful, but also our grounds on the negative precedent that this mine would set internationally, specifically that detailed evidence on that had been put before the Secretary of State, and they just hadn't grappled with it in their decision. That was unlawful, said
That's the previous Secretary of State under the last government.
The previous, yes, Michael Gove. And then there were also further arguments that we succeeded on. So there was this, in our view, entirely spurious claim that this was somehow going to be a net zero coal mine. And we think that's a contradiction in terms.
And that raises questions about companies that want to offset. This mine was saying that they were going to buy carbon offsets to make it a net zero operation. The court found against that too.
Yes.
And that could have a precedent for others as well, I suppose.
It could well do. The reason the court found that this was unlawful is because the mining company wanted to rely on offsets that were based in projects abroad. The UK government policy, as we argued in the planning inquiry, is clear that to reduce our UK emissions, we've got to rely on things happening in the UK, not things happening elsewhere. And furthermore, we also made the point that it's not appropriate to make use of offsets, which are a very finite resource, in order to justify a new coal mine. It's completely the wrong use of them anyway. So yes, the judge upheld both of our arguments on that too.
Well, a big day for you. Congratulations on that victory. But Ian, it does put the ball back in the government's court, of course. If the courts are going to find against fossil fuel projects like this, it does imply that cases in the Scottish courts against Rosebank and another oil field up there are also called into question. That puts the pressure on the government to make sure we can do this transition away from fossil fuels fast. Let's not forget, although the science on fossil fuel emissions is clear, we're still dependent for 75% of our energy needs in the UK on fossil fuels, and it's not a simple transition away from them.
Tom Clark, thanks very much. To the markets now, and it's a mixed picture overnight from the Asian markets, with Chinese markets at their lowest for 5 years, while the Australian markets neared an all-time high. The picture in Europe this morning we can take a little look at now. Blue across the board, all the major European indices up a little this morning. The FTSE 100 has also started the day in positive territory. There it is, thanks in part to news from some other miners, precious metal miners. Burberry and Rentokil are among the gainers following recent sell-offs. We can see their numbers there. And the Vodafone share price, as we mentioned a little earlier, hardly moving up, perhaps significantly, despite the warning from the CMA over its proposed merger with Three. The city doesn't appear worried. On to the currencies. Let's take a look at the pound. Again, in positive territory, a little against the dollar, down against the euro, and the euro up a tad against the dollar. And a barrel of Brent crude recovered after that midweek drop. It's up 1%, $72.69. Now, joining me today to discuss the market is Nathan Sweeney, Chief Investment Officer at Marlborough Investment Management. Morning, Nathan. Could we just start with our top story, the Vodafone-Three merger? It doesn't appear to have knocked confidence in either company on the market. So this suggests that investors think this deal will get done.
Yeah, so I think it's clear that the deal is likely to get done. If you look at the share price, it hasn't really reacted at all. And obviously, this report is coming out and saying that it's potentially bad for customers. And clearly, in a time where customers are facing increased costs, it's not something that customers want to see, increased bills coming through from phones. So I think good news really from a share price perspective, because it does say that it's likely the deal gets done.
Let's talk about a couple of stories and companies out of America overnight. Boeing. Very striking. They've got a new chief executive in place, an extremely troubled company, but a walkout on its production lines. This is more difficult news for a hugely significant and really important company in American life, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you think about Boeing, they've had a lot of difficulties over the course of the last year or so. So they're facing a lot of concerns about safety issues. They've had a couple of fatalities, and so some of those planes crashing. And ultimately, they're trying to turn things around. But as part of that, you're seeing that workers are looking for an increase in pay, so increased settlements coming through. And there was a deal on the table looking to increase pay by 25%, which is quite a sizable deal. But the union has rejected that. So, I suppose, not real good news from an investment perspective, but you have 30,000 workers who are based in Seattle and Portland, and they're downing their tools as of Friday. So that's not really welcome news for Boeing, considering they've been faced with a lot of headwinds over the course of last year.
Yeah. Let's talk about a tech stock now, one perhaps we don't talk about as much as some that have been around. Adobe. I know you're interested in the reaction to their profit numbers overnight.
Yeah, so if we think of Adobe, I suppose a lot of people in the marketing world would know Adobe because they're using, say, tools like Photoshop. So this is image editing. And with the onset of artificial intelligence or AI, there's a lot of competition coming through. So companies like Kavana and OpenAI has a product called DALL-E, which can create images. And so from Adobe's perspective, they've been considered as an AI loser for the first couple of months this year. And if you look at the share price, down about 26%. But what we've seen is they are closing the gap and they're increasing their use of artificial intelligence, which is helping them to create better images, even though some of those other providers have better image creating. But if we look at Adobe, they can incorporate things like editing, marketing, production, management, all on one platform using AI. And as a result of that, you're seeing some good earnings coming through. So revenue for that company came in at 5.41 billion. That's an 11% increase over the year. And if we look at the shares, we're seeing earnings per share of 376, and that was up from expectations of 305 or 305 in terms of earnings for 2023. So it's a really big jump. But if we look at the market wasn't really happy with those earnings, even though they were quite stellar, because they've said going forward, we expect to see earnings of around 358 to 363, which is lower than today. So that stock is expected to open down about 8% when the US market opens. I think it's a bit of a slight overreaction from the market because clearly they are a leader within the space. They're well positioned, but it just shows you the high expectations that the markets have for tech stocks generally related to AI.
Clearly, you make a good point. For tech stocks, the markets are a tough crowd. Thanks ever so much for your time this morning. We'll have to move on.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Still to come on Business Live. As only 14% of British workers say they're saving enough for retirement, what can be done to incentivise better financial planning?
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
Now, freedom!
There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
You want to talk business? Meet me in the On-Board Lounge. Fly Emirates. Fly better. Thank you.
British workers are focusing more on improving their physical health than their financial futures, according to new data out today. JP Morgan's digital wealth manager, Nutmeg, says the UK population is 5 times more likely to prioritise physical health than their retirement. Joining me now is the head of financial advice at Nutmeg, Claire Exley. Claire, presumably if we're going to live longer, that has implications for how much money we need to do it. What's the gap between people who are happy to go to the gym but not happy to check out their pension?
Yeah, so the latest research from Nutmeg shows that, as you say, people are much more likely to prioritise their physical health compared to their financial health. They're twice as likely to track their steps as to track their pensions and investments. And, you know, it's fantastic that people are thinking proactively about managing their long-term physical health. And I think if we can apply some of these forward-thinking mindsets to the financial health we'll need to enjoy that lifestyle when we get there, then people will be much more likely to achieve their financial goals longer term.
OK, it's a noble aim and one we all think we should do more about. So give me, what's the financial planning equivalent of 10,000 steps a day?
Well, I think just like taking that first step on Couch to 5K, probably taking the first step to understand your finances is the hardest one. And actually, people feel quite self-conscious because they don't understand all the details. It can seem complex. So I think the first step is get some information, take some guidance or advice and try and understand exactly what you've got. Make the most of employer contributions. Lots of people will be in an employer pension scheme, so make sure you're making the most of that. Think about if you've got previous pensions from previous employers. Do you know where they are, what they're invested in, what the charges are? And there could be benefit in bringing them all together in one place.
How do we, how do we make pensions more interesting, notwithstanding our efforts this morning? Can be a bit dull. Instagram's full of people telling us how to get fit. How do we reach younger people in the places where they live?
I think there's lots and lots of apps and calculators that are out there from companies like Nutmeg, and that's probably how we tap into this, you know, this tendency to want to track what we're doing, see our progress. So I think it's about just raising awareness of the different tools and techniques there are out there to get a better
Claire, I'm
understanding
going to
of
have
finances.
to jump in there. We've run out of time. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Don't forget to check out Sky News Money blog, and I'll be back at 4:30.